He's recovered! He's recovered!" Zosimov cried merrily as he greeted the newcomers. He had arrived some 10 minutes before and was sitting in the corner of the room he had occupied the previous day, on the sofa. Raskolnikov was sitting in the corner opposite, with all his clothes on, having washed himself thoroughly and combed his hair, things he had not done for a long time. The room filled up at once, but even so Nastasia succeeded in following the visitors in and began to listen. It was true. Raskolnikov had almost recovered, particularly by comparison with the day before, though he was still very pale, distracted and morose. Outwardly he looked like a man who had been wounded or is in severe pain. His eyebrows were drawn together, his lips pressed tight, his gaze inflamed. He spoke little and reluctantly, as though he were having to make an effort or were discharging some obligation, and every so often a vague unease appeared in his movements. With a sling or a taffeta bandage, he would have entirely resembled a man with a bruised arm or a very painful finger abscess or something of that sort. Nonetheless, even this pale and morose countenance brightened up for a moment, as if with a ray of light, when mother and sister made their entrance. But this merely lent the sufferer's expression an additional element of concentrated agony, replacing his previous melancholy absent-mindedness. The light soon faded, but the look of agony remained, and Zosimov, who was observing and studying his patient with all the youthful fervour of a doctor only just at the beginning of his career, noted with surprise that instead of displaying joy at the arrival of his nearest and dearest, Raskolnikov seemed to show a grim, concealed determination to endure another hour or two of torture, which could not now be avoided. He subsequently observed how almost every word of the conversation that now began seemed to touch some wound in his patient and irritate it. But at the same time he found himself wondering somewhat at the way in which yesterday's monomaniac, whom the slightest word had plunged into a state bordering upon frenzy, was today able to master himself and conceal his emotions. "Yes, now even I realise that I've almost recovered," said Raskolnikov, kissing his mother and sister affectionately, which at once made Pulcheria Alexandrovna beam with joy. "And I'm not saying that the way I did yesterday," he added, turning to Razumikin and squeezing his arm in a friendly fashion. "I'm really amazed at him today," Zosimov began, thoroughly relieved at the newcomer's arrival, as in the course of 10 minutes he had already succeeded in losing the thread of his conversation with the patient. "If he goes on like this, in another 3 or 4 days he'll be quite his old self again, just the way he was a month or 2 or possibly 3 ago. I mean, all this began and was on the cards a long time ago, wasn't it, eh? Will you admit now that you yourself were probably to blame?" he added with a cautious smile, as though he was still afraid of saying something that might irritate him. "It's very likely," Raskolnikov answered coldly. "I say this," Zosimov went on, acquiring a taste for his new role, "because by and by your complete recovery now depends solely on yourself. Now that it's possible to talk to you, I'd like to impress on you how essential it is that the original, as it were, root causes, which gave rise to your morbid condition, be eliminated. If they are, you'll be cured. If not, it will come back, only worse. You're an intelligent man, and I'm sure you've been keeping an eye on yourself. I think the beginning of your disorder coincided to some extent with your leaving the university. It's essential that you not be left as a loose end, and that's why I believe that hard work and a firmly fixed goal would be of great assistance to you." Yes, you're quite right. Look, I'll be returning to the university soon, and then everything will go like clockwork." Zosimov, who had begun delivering this sensible advice partly in order to make an impression on the ladies, was naturally somewhat perplexed when, upon concluding his remarks, he glanced at his hearer and observed on the latter's face an expression of undisguised mockery. This only lasted an instant, however. Pulcheria Alexandrovna at once began to thank Zosimov, in particular for having made his visit to their hotel the night before. "What? He was with you at night as well, was he?" Raskolnikov asked, seemingly in alarm. "I suppose that means you didn't get any sleep after your journey?" "Oh, Rodya, it was only until 2 o'clock. Even at home, Dunya and I never go to bed before 2. "I don't know how to thank him either," Raskolnikov went on, suddenly frowning and lowering his gaze. "Even disregarding the money side of it." "Excuse me for mentioning that," he said, turning to Zosimov. "I really don't know why I've deserved such special attention from you. I just don't understand, and because of that, I actually find it rather hard to accept. I tell you that in all openness." "Now, don't get annoyed," Zosimov laughed forcedly. "Just suppose you're my best patient. Well, you know, some of us who are only just beginning to practice medicine love our best patients as if they were our own children. And indeed there are some fellows who practically fall in love with them, and I don't exactly have very many patients." "To say nothing of him," Raskolnikov added, pointing at Razumikin, "even though he's had nothing from me but trouble and insults." "God, what rot he's talking! In a sentimental mood today, are we?" Razumikin exclaimed. If he had looked a little more searchingly, he would have seen that there here no sentimental mood, but something quite the opposite was involved. Avdotya Romanovna had, however, noticed this. She was keeping a fixed and uneasy gaze trained on her brother. "And as for you, mother, I don't even dare to say what I think," he went on, as though he were repeating some lesson he had learned by rote that morning. "Only today have I begun to have any inkling of what torments you must have been through here last night, as you waited for me to arrive." Having said this, he suddenly, without a word, held out his hand to his sister, smiling. This time, however, the smile contained a genuine, unfeigned emotion. Dunya at once caught and pressed the hand extended towards her, relieved and grateful. It was the first time he had said anything to her since their disagreement on the previous day. His mother's face lit up with delight and happiness at the sight of this conclusive and wordless reconciliation of brother with sister. "There, that's what I love him for," whispered the forever exaggerating Razumikin, energetically turning round in his seat. "He has these gestures." "And how well he does it all," thought the mother to herself. "What noble impulses he has, and how simply and with what tact he put an end to that misunderstanding with his sister yesterday, just by stretching out his hand at the right moment and giving her the right kind of look. What beautiful eyes he has, and how handsome his face is. But, good heavens, look at that suit he's wearing. How dreadfully badly he's dressed. Afanasy Ivanovitch's shop-boy Vladimir had better clothes. Oh, I could just rush up to him and throw my arms round him and cry, but I'm afraid. Lord, what's got into him? Even when he talks kindly, I'm afraid. But what am I afraid of?" "Oh, Rodya," she said suddenly, entering into the conversation in a hurry to respond to the remark he had just made. "You could never imagine how unhappy Dunetchka and I were yesterday. Now that it's over and we're all happy again, it won't matter if I tell you. Imagine, we came running here in order to embrace you, straight off the train practically, and this woman, yes, there she is, hello Nastasia, she suddenly told us that you had delirium tremens and had just given the doctor the slip and gone gibbering out into the street, and the people had set off to look for you. Can you imagine what we felt? I immediately thought of the tragic death of Lieutenant Potanchikov, whom we knew. He was a friend of your father's. You wouldn't remember him, Roger, who also ran off like that with delirium tremens, and he fell down a well in the yard outside. It wasn't until the next day that they were able to pull him out, and we, of course, thought it was even worse than that. We were going to rush away and look for Pyotr Petrovitch in order to enlist his help. Because, we were alone, completely alone," she wailed in a piteous voice, and then suddenly stopped short, remembering that it was still rather risky to mention Pyotr Petrovitch, even though they were all completely happy again. Yes, of course. That's all a great shame, Raskolnikov muttered in reply, but with such a distracted, inattentive air that Dunya looked at him in amazement. Now, what was the other thing I wanted to say? He continued, making an effort to remember. Oh, yes, please, Mother, and you too, Dunetchka. Don't get the idea I didn't want to come and see you today, but was waiting for you to come to me. What are you talking about, Rodya? Pulcheria Alexandrovna exclaimed, also in surprise. What's he doing, talking to us out of duty? Dunya wondered. He's making it up, and asking to be forgiven as though he were performing a ritual, or reciting some lesson or other. I'd just woken up, and I was going to come and see you, but my clothes held me up. I forgot to tell her, Nastasia, to clean that blood off yesterday. It was only a moment ago that I managed to get dressed. Blood? What blood? Pulcheria Alexandrovna said in alarm. Oh, yes, don't be upset. It was blood I got on myself yesterday when I was roaming around in a bit of a delirium. I stumbled across a man who had been run down in the street, a civil servant. In a delirium? But I mean, you can remember it all, Razumikin said, interrupting. That's true, Raskolnikov replied to this, with a kind of especial thoughtfulness. I can remember it all, right down to the very last detail. And yet, if you were going to ask me why I did it, where I was going, or what I said, I wouldn't be able to explain it now. That's a very common phenomenon, Zosimov chipped in. The execution of the deed is sometimes masterfully done, in the most ingenious fashion, yet the control of the individual actions that comprise it, the origin of those actions, is diffuse, and is associated with various morbid sensations, rather like a dream. I must say, it's probably just as well he thinks I'm practically a madman, Raskolnikov thought. But surely that's true of normal people as well, Dunya commented, looking at Zosimov with unease. An observation not far off the mark, Zosimov replied. It's perfectly true that in that sense we all of us, very often, conduct ourselves like mad folk, with the slight distinction that the mentally ill are a little crazier than we are. And so there it is necessary to draw a line. The harmonious individual, it needs to be said, hardly exists at all. Out of many tens, even hundreds of thousands, perhaps one or two at most are encountered, and even then in rather feeble versions. But the word crazy, which had carelessly zipped Zosimov's lips as he became immersed in chattering on about his favourite subject, everyone winced. Raskolnikov seemed to pay no attention. He sat brooding, a strange smile on his pale lips. He continued to weigh something over. Well, what about this man who's run down in the street? I interrupted you, Razumikin asked quickly. What? Said Raskolnikov, seeming to wake up. Oh, yes, well, I got some of his blood on myself when I was helping to carry him up to his apartment. Oh, incidentally, Mother, I did an unforgivable thing yesterday. I must have been quite out of my mind. I gave all that money you sent me to his wife for the funeral. Oh, she's a widow now, a pitiful, consumptive woman. She has 3 little fatherless children who are hungry. There's no food in their house. And there's another daughter too. I think you yourself might have given them that money if you'd seen them. Of course, I realised I had no right to part with it, especially since I knew how you'd got hold of it. In order to help anyone, one must first have a right to do so, for if one hasn't, crevez chien si vous n'êtes pas content. And he burst out laughing. Isn't that so, Dunya? No, it isn't, Dunya replied firmly. Aha, so you too have good intentions, he muttered, giving her a look almost of hatred, and smiling with derision. I might have guessed. Well, it does you credit, I suppose. Good for you. If you reach a point where you can't go on, you'll be miserable. Yet if you do manage to go on, you'll be even more miserable. But that's all nonsense, he added irritably, annoyed at having got carried away without meaning to. All I wanted to say was that of you, Mother, I ask forgiveness, he concluded sharply and abruptly. Enough, Roger. I'm sure that everything you do is wonderful, his mother said in relief. Oh, don't be, he replied, twisting his mouth into a smile. A silence ensued, and running through the whole of this conversation there had been a strained tenseness. It had affected silence, reconciliation and absolution in equal measure, and they had all felt it. "Why, it's as if they were afraid of me," Raskolnikov thought to himself, as he gave his mother and sister a suspicious look. And it really was the case that the longer Pulcheria Alexandrovna kept silent, the more frightened she felt. "I seemed to love them so much when they weren't here," flashed through his head. "You know, Roger, Marfa Petrovna has died," Pulcheria Alexandrovna suddenly twittered out. "Which Marfa Petrovna is that?" "Oh, good heavens! Marfa Petrovna, Svidrigaïlov's wife. I wrote so much to you about her." "Oh, yes, I remember. So she's died? Oh, she hasn't really, has she?" he said suddenly, starting as though he had woken up. "Died? What of?" "Can you imagine? It was so sudden." Pulcheria Alexandrovna got in quickly, encouraged by his curiosity. "It happened just at the time I posted that letter to you, that very same day. Imagine, that horrible man was apparently the cause of her death. They say he gave her a terrible beating." "Did they really live that kind of a life together?" he asked, turning to his sister. "No, quite the reverse, actually. He was always very patient with her, polite even. There were a lot of times when he made too many concessions to the kind of woman she was throughout all the 7 years they were married. In the end, he must have simply lost patience." "You mean he can't have been all that bad, if he lasted out for 7 years? You seem to be trying to find an excuse for him, Dunya." No, he's a horrible man. I can't imagine anyone or anything more horrible," Dunya replied, with something approaching a shudder, knitting her brows and beginning to reflect. "Well, that took place in the morning," Pulcheria Alexandrovna went on hurriedly. "Afterwards, she immediately ordered the horses to be harnessed, so she could drive straight to town after dinner, as that was what she always did in such situations. They say she ate her dinner with a good appetite." "After she had been beaten?" "Well, you see, that was always one of her customs, and no sooner had she finished than, so as not to be late in setting off, she went straight off to the bath-house. You see, she was apparently taking baths as part of some treatment. They have a cold spring there, and she used to bathe in it regularly every day, and no sooner had she entered the water than she suddenly had a stroke." "I bet she did," Zosimov said. "And had he beat her badly?" "Oh, come, that's neither here nor there," Dunya retorted. Actually, Mother, I don't know why you're bothering to tell me all this nonsense," Raskolnikov said suddenly, in an irritable tone, almost as if without meaning to. "Well, my dear, I didn't know what to talk about," burst from Pulcheria Alexandrovna. "What is it? Are you all afraid of me or something?" he said, with a distorted smile. "It really is true," said Dunya, looking sternly and directly at her brother. "When we were coming up the staircase, Mother was actually crossing herself from fear." His face was wrenched by a kind of convulsion. "Oh, what's got into you, Dunya? Please, don't be angry, Roger. Why did you say that, Dunya?" Pulcheria Alexandrovna said in embarrassment. "It's true that all the way here in the train I kept dreaming of how we were going to see each other again, how we would tell each other everything, and I was so happy that I didn't notice anything of the journey. But what am I going on about? I'm happy now. You really shouldn't say such things, Dunya. I'm happy just to see you, Roger." Yes, Mother," he muttered, embarrassed, avoiding her with his eyes and giving her hand a squeeze. "There'll be time for us to have a good talk." Having said this, he suddenly grew confused and turned pale. Again a certain recent sensation traversed his soul with a deadly chill. Again it suddenly became quite clear and self-evident to him that he had just told a horrible lie. That not only now would there not be time for him to have a good talk, it was now out of the question for him to speak to anyone about anything ever again. The effect on him of this tormenting thought was so powerful that for a split second He almost lost consciousness altogether. He got up from his seat and, without looking at anyone, began to march out of the room. "What's up with you?" Razumikin exclaimed, catching him by the arm. He sat down again and began to look around him in silence. They were all looking at him in bewilderment. "Why are you all looking so glum?" he cried suddenly, without any warning. "Come on, say something. You can't go on sitting like that. Well, let's hear you talk. Let's have a conversation. Here we all are gathered together, yet we haven't a word to say for ourselves. Come on, there must be something." "Oh, thank God. For a moment I thought he was going to start behaving like yesterday," Pulcheria Alexandrovna said, crossing herself. "What's wrong, Rodya?" Avdotya Romanovna asked, suspiciously. "Oh, it's nothing. I just remembered something silly, that's all," he replied, and at once gave a laugh. "Oh, well, if it was something silly, that's all right. Just for a moment. I also began to think," Zosifov muttered, getting up from the sofa. "But it's time I was going. I may look in again if I find you at home." He bowed to each of them in farewell and went out. "What a wonderful man," Pulcheria Alexandrovna observed. "Yes, he's wonderful. First-rate, educated, intelligent," Raskolnikov suddenly said, in an astonishing patter of words, and with an animation hitherto almost unprecedented. "I can't remember where I first met him. It was some time before I fell ill. I think I met him somewhere. This is a fine chap too," he said, nodding at Razumikin. "How do you like him, Dunya?" he asked her, and suddenly, for no apparent reason, burst out laughing. "Very much," Dunya answered. "Really, Roger, what an old swine you are!" terribly embarrassed and blushing, Razumikin managed to articulate, getting up from his chair. Pulcheria Alexandrovna gave a slight smile, and Raskolnikov crowed with loud laughter. "Where are you going?" "I've also got things to do." "No, you haven't. You stay here. Just because Zosimov's gone, it doesn't mean you have to go too. What time is it? Is it 12 yet? What a pretty watch that is, Dunya. But why have you gone quiet again? I'm doing all the talking." "It was a present from Marfa Petrovna," Dunya replied. "And a very expensive one too," Pulcheria Alexandrovna added. "I say, it's so big it's almost not like a lady's watch at all." "I like watches like this," said Dunya. "So, it's not a present from the bridegroom," Razumikin thought, and for some unknown reason felt relieved. "I thought it was from Lutzin," Raskolnikov observed. "No, he hasn't given Dunechka any presents yet." "Oh, I say, I expect you remember, Mother, the time when I too was in love and was going to get married," he said suddenly, looking at his mother, who was struck by the strange manner and tone of voice in which he had begun to talk about this. "Yes, yes, dear, I remember." Pulcheria Alexandrovna exchanged looks with Dunya and Razumikin. Yes. What else is there to say? I can't even remember much about it now. She was a sickly sort of girl," he went on, suddenly seeming to reflect and lowering his eyes. "Really not at all well. She was fond of giving to the poor. She was always dreaming about joining a nunnery. She once actually burst into tears when she started to tell me about it. Yes, I remember. I remember very well. She was such a plain little thing. I don't really know why I got so attached to her at the time. I think it must have been because she was always ill. If she'd been lame or a hunchback, I'd probably fallen in love with her even more." He smiled reflectively. "Yes, it was a sort of spring fever." "No, it wasn't just spring fever," Dunya said animatedly. He gave his sister a hard, intent look, but seemed not to catch what she had said, or possibly not to understand it. Then, in deep reflection, he got up, went over to his mother, gave her a kiss, returned to his place and sat down. "You love her even now," Pulcheria Alexandrovna said, touched. "Oh, now? Oh, yes, you're talking about her. No, now it's as if it had all happened in another world, and so long ago, and it's as if everything around me were happening somewhere else." He gave them a considering look. "And there you are too. It's as if I were looking at you from 1,000 miles away. But the devil knows why we're talking about this. Why ask me about it in any case?" he added with annoyance, and fell silent, biting his fingernails and lapsing into reflection once more. "What a horrible room you've got, Roger. It's like a coffin," Pulcheria Alexandrovna said suddenly, breaking her painful silence. "I'm convinced it's half because of this room that you've become such a melancholic." This room?" he replied, absent-mindedly. "Yes, this room's responsible for quite a lot of things. I've also thought that. Oh, but if you only knew what a strange thing you said just now, Mother," he added suddenly, with a peculiar, ironic grin. If this had gone on much longer, the company he was now in, with these members of his family whom he had not seen for 3 years, the family tone of the conversation coupled with the utter impossibility of actually discussing anything, would have ended by becoming quite intolerable to him. There was, however, one urgent practical matter that he must decide today, one way or the other, so he had determined earlier on awakening. Now he felt relief in the practical as a way out of the situation. "Look, Dunya," he began seriously and coldly. "Of course, I'm sorry about the way I said goodbye to you yesterday. But I feel it's my duty to remind you again what I said. It's either me or Lutzin. I may be a villain, but you mustn't go down that road. That jumped-up nobody. If you marry Lutzin, I'll stop regarding you as my sister." "Roger! Roger! Oh, no! Now you're acting the way you did yesterday," Pulcheria Alexandrovna wailed piteously. "And why do you keep calling yourself a villain? I can't bear it. You said the same thing yesterday." "Brother," Dunya replied firmly and also coldly, "somewhere in all this there is an error on your part. I thought about it all last night, and I believe I know what that error is. The whole trouble with you is that you seem to believe I'm sacrificing myself to someone for someone else's sake. That really is not the case. I'm simply getting married for my own sake, because things are not going well for me. Later on, of course, I shall be pleased if I can succeed in being of assistance to my family, but that is not the principal element in my determination." "She's lying," he thought to himself, biting his fingernails in fury. "The proud bitch. She doesn't want to admit that she has an ambition to be a benefactress. What arrogance! Oh, these base characters! Even when they love, it's as if they hate it. How I hate them all!" "In other words," Dunya continued, "I am marrying Pyotr Petrovitch because I consider that to be the lesser of two evils. I intend to fulfil decently all the expectations he has of me, and thus I am not deceiving him. Why did you smile like that just now?" She flushed, and in her eyes there was a momentary gleam of anger. "Ah, so you're going to fulfil them all, are you?" he asked with a poisonous smile. "Within certain limits. Both the manner and the form of Pyotr Petrovitch's proposal showed me at once what he requires. Of course, it's probably true that he has rather too high an opinion of himself, but I hope that he has a high opinion of me too. Why are you laughing again?" "Why are you blushing again? You're lying, sister. You're lying for the sake of it, out of sheer female cussedness, just in order to have your own way with me. You can't possibly respect Lutzin. I've met him and talked to him, so what you're doing is selling yourself for money, or at any rate acting basely, and I'm glad you can at least blush about it." "It's not true. I'm not lying," Dunya exclaimed, losing her sang-froid. "I won't marry him unless I'm convinced that he has a high opinion of me and will look after me. I won't marry him unless I'm firmly persuaded that I can respect him. Fortunately, I am so persuaded, and have actually received certain confirmation of that today, and a marriage of this kind is not a vile business, as you call it. Even if you're right, even if I really had decided to do something vile, wouldn't it be cruel of you to say a thing like that to me? Why do you demand of me a heroism you yourself probably don't possess? That's despotism. It's coercion. If I ruin anyone's life, it will only be my own. I haven't killed anyone yet." "Why are you looking at me like that? Why have you gone so pale? Roger, what's the matter with you? Roger, dear." "Oh, good Lord, you've given him a fainting fit," Pulcheria Alexandrovna exclaimed. No, it's not serious. It's nothing. My head started to go round, that's all. It's not a fainting fit. You've got fainting fits on the brain. Yes, now, what was I going to say? Yes, what is this certain confirmation you've received today that makes you so able to respect him and know that he has a high opinion of you, as you said? You did say yesterday, didn't you? Or did I mishear you?" "Mother, show Roger Petrovitch's letter," Dunya said. With trembling hands, Pulcheria Alexandrovna gave him the letter. He took it with great curiosity, but before unfolding it he suddenly looked at Dunya with vague astonishment. "It's funny," he said slowly, as though a new idea had suddenly occurred to him. "Why am I getting so worked up? What's all the fuss about? Go marry anyone you like." He said it almost to himself, but spoke the words out loud and looked at his sister for a moment or two, seemingly perplexed. At last he unfolded the letter, still retaining an air of strange and vague astonishment. Then slowly and attentively he began to read it, and read it through twice. Pulcheria Alexandrovna was in a state of peculiar anxiety, and indeed they were all waiting for something peculiar to happen. "I find this surprising," he began after some reflection, handing the letter back to his mother, but not addressing anyone in particular. "I mean, he's a man of business, a lawyer, and he even talks in that special way with a bit of a flourish. Yet he writes like an illiterate." They all shifted uneasily. This was not at all what they'd been expecting. "Oh, they all write like that," Razumikin observed curtly. "Oh, you've read it too, have you?" "Yes." We showed it to him, Roger. We asked for his advice earlier," an embarrassed Pulcheria Alexandrovna began. "It's actually written in a judicial style," Razumikin cut in. "Judicial documents are still written like that." Judicial. That's right. A judicial business style. Not exactly illiterate, but not what you might call literary either. A business style. Pyotr Petrovitch makes no attempt to conceal the fact that he was brought up on a shoestring, actually boasts of having made his own way in the world, Avdotya Romanovna observed, slightly offended by her brother's new tone. "Well, if he boasts of it, there must be something in it. Don't let me contradict him. If you ask me, sister, you're offended because after reading the whole letter I could only find such a frivolous comment to make. I think I've started talking about such trifles in order to upset you because I'm annoyed with you. On the contrary, with regard to the style, there occurred to me an observation that is not at all out of place in the present context. There's a certain expression there, 'You will have only yourself to thank,' which puts it all very clearly and succinctly. And there's also his threat to walk out if I show up. That threat is nothing more nor less than a threat to abandon you both if you don't obey him, and do it to you now when he's brought you all the way to St. Petersburg. Well, what's your opinion? Don't you think one ought to be offended at such an expression from Luzin every bit as much as if he had used it," he pointed to Razumikin, "or Zosimov, or any of the rest of us?" "No," Dunya replied, growing animated. "I realised very well that bit was put too clumsily, and that perhaps he's not all that gifted at writing. It was clever of you to spot that, Roger. I actually didn't expect—" "It's put in judicial language, and in judicial language that's the sort of thing they say. And I dare say it came out more crudely than he'd intended. But I'm afraid I'm going to have to disillusion you a bit. There's another expression in that letter, a certain slanderous remark about myself. And a pretty vile one too. I gave that money yesterday to a consumptive and broken widow, and not on the pretext of funeral expenses, but precisely in order to help her to cover them. And I didn't put the money in the hands of her daughter. an unmarried woman, as he writes, of immoral behaviour, and one, incidentally, whom I saw yesterday the first time in my life, but gave it straight to the widow. In all this I see an over-hasty desire to blacken my name and make me quarrel with you. It's again expressed in judicial language, that's to say with an all too obvious disclosure of the intended aim, and with a haste that's thoroughly inept. He's a clever man, but in order to act cleverly, cleverness alone is not enough. It all bespeaks the man, and I don't really think he has a high opinion of you. I'm telling you this solely for your own edification, because I sincerely wish you well. Dunya made no reply. Her decision had been made long ago, and she was simply waiting for it to be evening. "So what have you decided, Rodya?" Pulcheria Alexandrovna asked, disturbed even more than she had been the previous day, the source of her fresh anxiety being his new and suddenly adopted business-like tone of voice. "What do you mean, decided?" "Well, Pyotr Petrovitch says in his letter that he doesn't want you to be present this evening, and that he'll leave if you come. So will you?" "I must say I think that's not for me to decide, but for you. If Pyotr Petrovitch's demand doesn't seem offensive to you. And secondly for Dunya, if she's also not offended by it. As for myself, I'll do what you prefer," he added coldly. "Dunya's already decided, and I agree with her completely," Pulcheria Alexandrovna hurried to insert. "Rodya, I've decided to ask you most urgently to be present at this meeting of ours," Dunya said. "Will you come?" "I will." "I'd like to ask you to come and join us at 8 o'clock too," she said, turning to Razumikin. "Mother, I'm inviting him too." "That's excellent, Dunya. Well, since you're all decided now, let that be the way it's to be," Pulcheria Alexandrovna added. "Why, I feel better now. I don't like all that pretence and lying. I'd rather we spoke the whole truth, whether it makes Pyotr Petrovitch angry or not."